How's it going, guys? Welcome back for another video. It's been a while since we've talked about S&box. Garry has been posting some updates. There's definitely been development on S&box, and we're gonna go to take a look at the commit log. And you can see yesterday Garry's working on it, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 7 days ago. So you can see he's definitely doing some consistent work on S&box. It is in development, and this has been going on for a couple months. All of this work is on Source 1 engine. Basically, the holdup right now is Facepunch is waiting for a Source 2 engine, but they can kind of sort of get started by implementing S&box into Source 1 engine. Of course, they can't implement everything because Source 1 and Source 2 are of course quite different, but they can at least get a nice little head start on it. So when Source 2 is released to Facepunch, the workload is going to be a lot less than it would be if they hadn't have done all this work. You can see Garry was a little bit active in the chat today. We're going to scroll up and try to find his messages here. He talked for quite a while, shared some information. We're going to scroll up and here we go. He shared a new blog post. Now this blog post is pretty similar to the last one. It's mostly about the console and the user interface, panorama, but there is some new information, and we're just going to go through this blog post really quick. It's titled like lockdown progress. I'm not sure what he means by lockdown. Maybe the COVID-19 lockdown, been making progress sitting at home while everything's shut down. Let's see. Subtitle: Source 2 is still eluding us. Let me get the mic closer. Still eluding us, but here's some stuff I've managed to get done without it. I was hoping to have a different stuff when posted this blog. I didn't want it to be another UI and console post, but guess what? That's what you're getting. I'm still working on Source 1, trying to work on things that will transfer if we eventually get Source 2. If we eventually get Source 2. That's a little strange. I missed that the first time I read this. But it says if we eventually get Source 2. So that sort of hint that there's maybe a possibility in Garry's mind that they might not get Source 2, question mark. I've done quite a bit over the last few months that should transfer pretty good. Game mode, entity, console UI HUD, code sandboxing, console commands, console variables, RPCs, properties, etc. I know Source 2 has a whole new asset loading system, so I've been apprehensive to start work on anything in that area just yet. Okay, so next up is console. If there's one thing I missed from Unity, it's seeing a list of entities and being able to inspect them at runtime. Source 2 comes with an outside console, but I think we can enhance that. So this is the console I've been messing with. And I took a look at this console, and it actually looks pretty well done. We've got our stack trace and logs over here. It looks like these are links, so you can just go ahead and click. Like if you have an error, for example, in the stack trace area, if you have an error, you can just go ahead and click it, and it opens up Visual Studio right where that error is. And then of course we've got our huge log console, your typical console right here, which shows all the stuff. And up here is a FPS graph. It shows frame time. I think somewhere in the blog it also shows garbage collections. We're actually gonna close out of this and scroll down. Let's see here. He shows a little of the autocomplete functionality. Let me zoom in on that just so you can see a little better. Shows a little bit of the autocomplete functionality. It looks like you can press Control F to search for a command as well, maybe. So it definitely looks like a really console that is really intuitive to use. Pretty good UX. So let's see here. Performance. Okay, here's the FPS graph. You can see it changed colors. He talks a little bit about this. Having a FPS counter in game is cool, but I wanted a bit more. So here we get a bit of a graph, and it changes color when the frame rate stutters. It also got lines on the bottom showing when garbage is collected. So these lines right here would be garbage collection spikes. Then we have our FPS graph, and if we have a reduction in FPS, you can actually see it change color. Nice little visual effect there to let you know what's going on. And then we have lists of stuff. We've got this looks like all strictly UI related. And then let's see, I wonder if he switches over to this tab here. I think that's the entity tab. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure what this tab is, not sure what that tab is. But here he's showing a list of all the UI elements that are in game. And this is actually quite a step up from Garry's modding. As far as I know, there's nothing like this in Gmod. And this would be more similar to like a game engine editor such as Unity. You've got your hierarchy showing everything that's in game. So that's definitely a huge step up in the when it comes to modding and creating for S&box. So definitely a nice feature to have. And then we scroll down a little bit more, and we have future. My intention when or if we get the Source 2 is to make it so the game runs inside the console. That is to mean it will optionally appear in a window inside the console. That's what I'm designing for. You will obviously be able to make it go full screen or suck it out to a window, etc. But for me, the way I work, it'd be more comfortable in the console window most of the time. I don't intend to turn the console into a Unity type game editor. It should be for diagnostics only. Any tools should run in a separate process so we don't run into the Unity problem of not being able to work on something else because an editor tool is doing something. So that's seems like a really good plan. So basically we're going to take this, the plan is to basically take, let me zoom back out here. Okay, the plan is to basically take this and have a separate tab that shows in game. So it's basically the game integrated into the console. So what we're looking at here isn't actually built into S&box. I believe this is an external application, and I believe it was actually developed with Blazor. If you're not familiar with Blazor, it is a C# web development framework, which is actually quite nice, by the way. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend you do if you're into web development and C#. But yeah, basically, the plan is to have a standalone tab that basically renders what's happening in game. And then we have UI performance test. Here's another little video. He's basically spawning UI elements as particles. This isn't obviously something that you'd normally want to do because UI is not designed for particles, but as you can see, it still performs pretty well for being a user interface. It still performs quite well. Not bad anyways. I made this particle test to test the performance of the UI system. As it says in the video, keep in mind that in a real UI environment, you're not changing thousands of panels and creating hundreds of panels every frame. This is meant to see how much we can get away with. Keep in mind every frame, it's changing every panel position, setting its background color, setting its opacity, deleting dead panels, creating new panels to fill their space. I was pretty impressed with the performance I got out of it. Each panel is created like this, and just show some code for that. Pretty straightforward code. So we're talking about thousands of panels with a border radius and a 3-pixel border. Further down on the blog, we have grid and property sheet, which is, we'll just play this video real quick. So it looks like just a really simple and intuitive way to create flexible grids, I guess. If you want to check this full video out, you can of course go to sandbox.facepunch.com and go to their blog section. Doesn't really seem to be much to see there. I'm trying to project forward what UI controls will we need if we're thinking about making a Garry's Mod sequel. A grid and a property sheet is obvious, so I've been working on that. I've got the grid so you can choose between a fixed column count or a fixed cell width, which automatically wraps. It's got options for cell spacing and fill in the space, which avoids that horrible gap down the right. The property sheet isn't done yet. I've only got text editing at the moment, so still needs to add support for number editing, range sliders, checkboxes, lists, enums, etc. Here's the code that creates this test. So actually, when I first saw this, I thought it was sort of complex maybe, but I suppose a lot of the grid system is tucked away in the back end, so user doesn't have to mess with that. And the code that actually creates this is actually quite simple. As you can see here, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines of code to create basically this, which seems pretty handy, pretty good. And then we've got splitters, another control I'll more than likely want and relatively tricky to implement, so I thought I'd put it near the top of the list. In the video above, you can also see how the property sheet folds if it goes, folds in if its width goes too small thanks to the style system and panorama. This can be done without any super complicated code. And we'll check out this video. So basically it looks like a nice little system with a bunch of tabs that can be arranged neatly. I can't remember what this kind of UI system is called, but Garry calls them splitters, so we're going to call them splitters, I guess. Definitely a really nice feature to have for any type of UI development, especially if you're creating something complicated that's going to require a lot of different components. And up next is HUD. We're just going to watch this video first. What we're looking at is actually Dust 2 from CSGO. I believe Facepunch has an internal version of Source Engine where they can actually load CSGO content, so an updated version of Source Engine. This is private, of course, and what we're looking at here is the text that appears to be floating in world space. Now, this text isn't actually floating in world space. It's rendered on screen with its position and scaling modified to make it appear as if it is floating in world space, and we'll actually go through that here. A worry when implementing a UI system is whether it's possible to sync it with the in-game stuff. What I mean is if I draw a name tag above a player's head, is it going to float behind him when he moves about? So I made a quick test to try it out, ignoring all the missing textures. I deleted them to save space, and I'm only using this as a basic test map. I'm not interested in assets right now. These UI elements aren't in world, they're still 2D on the HUD. I'm just positioning them and scaling based on distance and field of view, so they seem like they're in the world. So if you're familiar with math, you probably realize that this is probably really simple math to accomplish this type of thing, but somebody who's not a math wizard like myself, it seems sort of complicated. I'd probably definitely be doing a lot of Googling to try to accomplish this. I'm sure Gary probably quite smart with this, and he probably just whipped it up in 5 minutes, but yeah. Give that a thumbs up. Now we're gonna look at chat. Hides old entries until you open the chat thing, which is, you know, pretty basic behavior for a chat box. The UI design is quite nice. Another test was the chat UI. Can we take the focus from the game and put it on our text entry? Then when that's closed, can we return it to the game? This sounds like simple stuff, but it can be a pain in the ass. I can agree with that. I've developed games. I have a multiplayer game with the chat box, and I totally agree that prioritizing focus and you know, handling keybinds when something is focused on UI elements can definitely be a pain in the ass to implement. Like, the binds still run in the game when we're chatting. If we press enter to send a chat message, which closes the text entry box, does the game then pick up the enter key and run the bind on it? This also was an opportunity to work out the server client architecture and how they interact. In Gary's mod, the server and the client Lewis states are separate. In S&box, they're running in the same realm. Interesting. So check this out. All this code is on the chat UI control. So you can take a look at this code. It basically shows how the chat box is implemented. Of course, check the blog out if you want to look at the code in more detail. Some code gets called when you press enter, blah, 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 basic chat box stuff. And that is the end of the blog. We're going to show some support here and click thumbs up on everything that I missed. Speaking of thumbs up, make sure you thumbs up this video. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed. And yeah, more S&box updates coming when they are available. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.